Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Luke from Guild Umbra. In this video, we will be talking about the tank Stalker role, um, specifically the stat priorities we look at in tanking. Um, so, anyway, I had a lot of fun with the Stalker DPS builds and stat priorities. So, same day, I'm going to jump right into this thing and knock it out. So first, stat priority as the tank. Actually, before I go there, I think I'm going to go ahead and talk about stances. Obviously, as a tank, you're going to want to be in evasive because it gives you 20% more deflect chance, and it also increases your resistances, which is tag, magic, and physical resistances. And it somewhat makes up for the fact that you are a medium cloth or medium armor wearer as a tank. So anyway, first primary stat is called tech. Tech is your support power. The more support power you do, translate into more threat you build, if that makes sense. So anyway, the next stat priority would be insight, which is deflect, crit, hit chance, and deflect rating. The next primary stat would be grit, which is your base health. And then you have finesse, your strike through, as the next primary stat. Now, like I did with healing and the Esper, before I go to the secondary stats, I want to talk a little bit about what these are doing in the current state of the game. Right now, it doesn't appear that tech does a ton of threat. It just does more damage, and not always does damage translate into threat, if that makes sense. Anybody who's played the Stalker will understand that statement. But it seems to me that insight is a huge deal. Because as you'll see in our next video where we talk about the tanking build I kind of went through, every time you deflect you have a proc ability that does more damage, which in turn means not always, but allows you to build more threat. So you can sort of play around, or you'll have to play around. I know a lot of tanks in other MMOs had to always play around with these primary stats a good bit to see where they were standing and how they were performing before they put a set in stone priority on each stat. For example, like I stated in my last stat priority video for the DPS Stalker, that 12% strike through is where you want to be at before you go into raids. This is also true for tanking, because obviously if you're having your abilities get deflected, then you're not able to build threat. So it's just something to throw out there and think about, and also just throwing grit into the discussion too. This is sort of a buffer, if you will. In most MMOs, it's a buffer, your health, for your healer. Because stacking all the grit while also sacrificing insight and tech, and even finesse for that matter, is a bad way to build, in my opinion. So you have to balance these stats, is where I'm getting at. Okay? It's not necessarily, well, if you have a piece of armor that has more tech, then I'm going to take it. No. As a tank, you have to prioritize these abilities, stats, to be able to see where you stand. Okay? So it's not always about, like I stated earlier, the piece of armor that has the most support power is going to be the armor I'm going to go with. Now that's true with claws, okay? The better weapons you get in the game tend to have better support power. So obviously you would take those, okay? I don't know, not sure if I was very clear with that, but I'm sure you guys will tell me anyway. But anyway, moving on. The secondary stats that I would focus on are support power, followed by deflect chance, followed by deflect critical hit chance, followed by max health, and lastly strike through. As a tank, you're not really concerned too much with doing damage. You're more concerned with keeping those mobs on you and not on your healer, and not on those aggravating DPS that love to go balls to the wall every chance they get. Instead of thinking about, well, if that mob hits me, I might die. They don't really think about that. They just want to do damage, and that's a poor way to think about doing damage. And that was something I experienced while tanking with a majority of the classes, was that there was a lot of thread issues. But in the current state of the game right now, it appears that they've balanced out the tanks a little bit better. It used to be that if you wanted to run a Stalker, you were like the #1 tank for the longest time. You know, and I think of the Stalker tank as the evasive tank. You'd have different types of tanks, okay? You have the tank that is more or less, in this game, a ranged tank, the engineer. You have the Stalker, which is more of an evasive tank. He stacks a lot of deflect to make up for the fact that he wears medium armor. And then you have the Warrior, which is also a heavy armor class, just like the engineer, which is your stereotypical tank in most MMOs. He's melee, So anyway, I'm going on a long rant again, and I feel myself doing that, and I feel everyone sighing and crying and whatever. But in summary, as the Stalker tank, the stats that you kind of look for is a good balance of tech and insight and grit, followed by the stat threshold of 12% strike through. Okay? Secondary stats are the same way. Your good balance of support power, even though support power is higher up there on the secondary stats, followed by deflect chance, followed by deflect critical hit chance, followed by strike through, up to 12%. This concludes our video of the tanking Stalker. I hope I didn't confuse you too much. In the next video, we will start talking about going into some builds and amps. And we'll talk a little bit more, and this will make a little bit more sense as I go into the builds. My reasoning for balancing these stats will come into play. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Tune in next time. We'll dive into the tank Stalker builds. This is Luke from Guild Umbra, signing off.